in the heart of Rome, in a villa adorned with flowers and fine art, amidst a crowd of anxious nobles and eager guests, Messalina and Silas stood ready to exchange vows. Tonight, they would defy Roman tradition, challenging conventions that had stood for centuries. Tonight, their love would become a revolution, their marriage a statement that echoed through time. Messalina, resplendent in the finest silk and gold, looked out at the sea of faces gathered before her. Her eyes met those of Narcissus, the freedman, who stood apart with a strange mixture of fascination and apprehension. Her gaze then drifted to the city gates, where shadows were lengthening and the evening chill was beginning to creep across the hills. She wondered if Claudius, her husband, her emperor, was yet aware of the storm that awaited him upon his return. The priest stepped forward, beginning the ancient words that had sanctified countless Roman marriages, that had bound men and women in sacred bonds for generations past. With each phrase, Messalina felt the pulse of the crowd quicken, aware that every word they uttered pushed them closer to the edge of convention. The music swelled, drowning out a murmur of unease that spread like ripples across the assembly. Dancers swirled around the platform, their movements a dizzying blur that symbolized the intoxicating rush of love, the recklessness that bound Messalina and Silas together. The ceremony progressed with unsettling speed, as if those present wished to complete the ordeal and flee the consequences of their actions. But with each recitation of ancient poetry, each gift exchanged, each toast raised in their honor, Messalina's grip on reality seemed to fade. She existed in a bubble of sound and color, her mind focused solely on the task at hand, performing the ritual that would enshrine her defiance in the eyes of Rome. But even as the celebrations peaked, messengers arrived, bearing dispatches from distant provinces, from imperial legions on campaign, from governors charged with maintaining order throughout the empire. The content of these dispatches could not be deciphered from afar, but their frequency and urgency signaled an ominous shift in the balance of power. Narcissus, ever vigilant, observed these arrivals closely, knowing that they carried tidings of great import. Messalina, however, dismissed them with a wave of her hand, lost as she was in the vortex of her own making. The wine flowed freely, the poetry grew more passionate, and the guests, driven by a mixture of fascination and fear, drank deeply, embracing the sensory overload that threatened to consume them. Messalina's close allies, those who had benefited most from her meteoric rise, those who had journeyed with her through the treacherous waters of the imperial court, watched the proceedings with a mixture of admiration and terror. They knew they were on the precipice of a new era. An era that could either elevate them to unprecedented heights or plunge them into the abyss of oblivion. Within the grand villa, a maelstrom of emotions brewed: hope, trepidation, excitement, and, above all, a dawning realization that nothing would ever be the same again. On the far horizon, silhouetted against the dying embers of the setting sun, stood the emperor. The journey from the villa to the city took hours, a lifetime for the accused, an eternity for the innocent. For Messalina, time flowed differently. Every minute brought the chill certainty of ending. Every second stretched the confines of a grave that awaited her. Along the way, the countryside witnesses shifted. Villas gave way to farms, orchards to olive groves. Servants looking out from fields bowed their heads as the procession passed. The sun beat down on an uncaring earth that knew nothing of the drama it cradled. The procession entered Rome quietly, almost furtively. No fanfare heralded its arrival. No trumpets blared defiance. No standards flew high. The city watched, waited, observed, knowing that the events it had witnessed would cast long shadows on the months to come. Within the walls, Claudius, the actor, gave way to the monarch. Gone was the hesitation that had marked his earlier years as emperor. Now, with the steady gaze of one who has tasted betrayal and knows its depth, the emperor assumed control. Romans had known strong rulers, had lived under the iron fist of kingship. They had seen the calculated moves of ambitious emperors, the ruthless efficiency of those who knew no other law than self-preservation. But in Claudius, they saw a different kind of authority emerge. A scholar betrayed, a husband wounded, a leader tested by fire. Claudius tightened his grip on the reins of power. He summoned the Senate, not to bask in adulation or ride the wave of popular acclaim, but to deliver a firm verdict, a pronouncement that left no room for interpretation. There was no ambiguity in his words. No attempt to shift blame. No effort to portray himself as victim. Just the cold clarity of one who dealt with consequences. His speech was brief, devoid of rhetoric, leaving little doubt about his determination. Like an inscription carved in stone, his words echoed through the halls of power. Messalina had been found guilty. She was stripped of her titles, banished from the city, and forbidden from ever setting foot on Roman soil again. Her possessions were confiscated, her name erased from public records. This wasn't just a sentence. It was a warning. Rome had shown mercy to many a sinner, but it never forgave. As the crowds dispersed that day, whispers followed. The ghost of Messalina haunted the forum, her memory lurking in the shadows of temples and basilicas. The wedding that shook Rome was now a tomb that sealed her fate. And yet, the city kept turning. Wheels of commerce hummed, merchants hawked their wares, soldiers marched to distant wars. Life flowed on as if the spectre of treason hadn't darkened its doorsteps. The bustling vitality of Rome concealed the tremors that ran through its core. Messalina's removal revealed fissures in the foundation of the sight that greeted those entering the Senate meeting was unlike any seen before. The place normally occupied by the emperor's chair was empty. Instead, two chairs stood side by side, one for the absent Augustus and one for his wife Agrippina. It was an arrangement that had become distressingly common in recent years, leading many senators to wonder whether the empire's future was being decided by the whims of a woman who cared nothing for the laws and customs of Rome. And they weren't wrong. For the last few years, the Roman Empire had been governed by a remarkable woman named Messalina. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about her position. She was the wife of the Emperor Claudius, a member of the imperial family and a prominent figure in Roman society. However, appearances were deceiving, because Messalina was not content with playing the role of a conventional Roman woman. She had no interest in managing a household, bearing children, or adorning herself with jewels and fine garments. Instead, she sought out opportunities to exercise power, influence decisions, and shape the destiny of the empire itself. She did not do this through official channels. However, she was not a priestess, a Vestal Virgin, a magistrate, or a senator. She was an empress who ran a shadow government in secret, undermining the authority of the institutions that had been established to govern Rome. This behavior shocked and horrified many Romans, but others recognized it as a symptom of something more significant: a growing discontent with the status quo and a desire for bold, unconventional solutions to Rome's increasingly complex problems. It is essential to understand the context in which Messalina rose to prominence. Rome was a republic in name only. Its institutions had been hollowed out by decades of corruption, factionalism, and civil wars. The provinces were exploited for the personal gain of a few, while the needs of the people were ignored. The masses of Rome itself grew poorer, hungrier, and more desperate as the gap between rich and poor widened. Against this backdrop of decay and decline, Messalina emerged as a breath of fresh air, a new kind of leader willing to challenge the status quo and pursue radical solutions to Rome's problems. Her journey to prominence was long and arduous. She had humble beginnings, born to a minor branch of the Julian clan, and married off to Claudius, a man considered too weak and ineffective to seriously contend for power. Despite these disadvantages, she refused to accept her limited role in Roman society. Instead, she set out to make a name for herself, first through marriage and then through the strategic pursuit of influence and power. Her relationship with Claudius was anything but conventional. They had little in common, not physically, intellectually, or emotionally, and their marriage was childless and loveless, which gave Messalina more freedom to pursue her own interests outside their relationship. But it also meant that she had no natural allies within the imperial household. She had to build her own support base from scratch, cultivating relationships with influential figures across the empire, and assembling a network of loyal subordinates who shared her vision of a new Rome. This network is what enabled her to build her shadow government. It consisted of freedmen, secretaries, courtiers, provincial governors, and even military commanders. All these individuals communicated directly with Messalina, providing her with information about events across the empire and carrying out tasks on her behalf. Through this network, she monitored public sentiment, identified problems, and devised solutions, then presented them to Claudius for his approval. He rarely resisted her suggestions, not because he lacked The chill of the Roman winter settled over the city, blanketing the Palatine Hill in a layer of frost that seemed to seep into even the sunlit rooms of the imperial palace. The vibrant hues of autumn had faded, leaving behind a landscape of muted colors and subdued activity, as if the vitality of the year had retreated before winter's icy grip. Inside the palace walls, however, life continued its intricate dance. Servants hurried along colonnaded walkways carrying messages and meals. Soldiers polished armor and maintained weapons, ensuring the military presence that underwrote imperial peace. Officials prepared reports and petitions, keeping the machinery of governance turning steadily towards a predetermined outcome. And amidst this ceaseless activity, Claudius moved like a scholar amidst his books, consulting documents, issuing directives, seeking clarifications, always striving to ensure that every decision was well informed and thoroughly justified. If there was a thread connecting these seemingly disparate activities, it was the quiet determination to maintain stability above all else. There was no grand vision animating these tasks, no audacious projects demanding attention, no bold initiatives seeking approval. The agenda of the imperial household revolved around diligence, discretion, and the cautious accumulation of knowledge. This change in tone and tempo extended to the emperor's reception of visitors as well. Those seeking imperial favor presented credentials and portfolios, outlined plans and proposals, expounded theories and predictions, all with the expectation that Claudius would evaluate their ideas with patience and precision. There was no longer the brashness that had characterized earlier audiences. No bold pronouncements seeking validation, no outrageous demands expecting immediate response. Instead, a new decorum had taken hold, a restrained formality that emphasized the deliberate nature of imperial decision-making. At the center of this transformation sat Claudius himself, physically present but mentally engaged in a world of texts and records, where Messalina had thrived on spontaneity and sensation. Claudius immersed himself in the slow unfolding of facts, figures, and precedents. If Messalina had been drawn to power for the rush of victory, the thrill of manipulation, Claudius approached it as a series of puzzles to be solved, problems to be documented and dissected, territories to be mapped and categorized. He gathered testimony from all affected parties, systematically analyzed the results against his stated objectives, and compared outcomes with alternative approaches that might have been pursued. The process was methodical, thorough, and designed to reach conclusions based on evidence rather than political convenience or personal prejudice. But even the most careful analysis couldn't eliminate the political dimensions of these decisions. Every policy change created winners and losers. Every reform generated support from some quarters and opposition from others. Claudius found himself navigating factional conflicts that had been suppressed during Messalina's dominance, but now emerged with renewed intensity as different groups competed to shape the post-Messalina era of imperial system. The resolution of these conflicts required all the diplomatic skills Claudius could muster, along with some he had to develop through trial and error. He learned to build coalitions that could support necessary changes while minimizing organized resistance. He discovered the importance of timing, introducing controversial reforms when political circumstances were most favorable and delaying others until opposition could be reduced through negotiation or compromise. Most importantly, he developed the ability to frame policy changes in terms of returning to traditional Roman values rather than rejecting his wife's innovations, making reform seem conservative rather than radical. This rhetorical strategy proved crucial for maintaining stability during the transition period. By emphasizing continuity with Republican traditions and early imperial precedents, Claudius could implement significant changes while avoiding the appearance of dramatic policy reversals that might have suggested weakness or uncertainty. The emperor, who had been mocked for his scholarly interests,